So I'm Colin Linsky, and first of all, thank you very much for enduring me in English. That's the best I can do. I don't have any other languages, I'm afraid. My role is within IBM is to lead predictive analytics for the retail sector. So that means internally looking at how we integrate anything to do with predictive analytics within the rest of IBM and all the portfolio, but also to do engagements like this to sort of spread the word to both customers, but also internally as well. I have another role as well, and that is to sort of build some assets and sort of things that can be reused and help explain how these things work. So what I'm going to do today is hopefully make some links that I've had absolutely no idea what you just talked about for the last 45 minutes, but I've got a rough idea of some of the topics. One of the key areas is that I think it's worth stating right at the beginning, we're in a changed world now. Everything is at a tipping point, I think, in terms of how we deal with things like data, how we deal with things like customers, how we just get to understand what it is that we do. Technology, technology is there at the top of the pile. Technology is changing the way that we do things. It's changing our expectations, it's changing our opportunities. And we need some ammunition to go back against the world to do things in a different way. You've probably heard the expression about insanity, is to do the same things over and over again and expect a different outcome. And I think we're at that point now where we need to do some different things. There are some traditional things that still work, but they're only going to get us so far against this changed world. So what I'd like to do is talk about some ways that you might be using some of these things already, but if not, you might like to consider some of those, adopting some of those sort of practices and ideas. First, quick check. Now you've heard me speak. I speak quite quickly. So is that okay for everyone? English is fantastic. Brilliant. Perfect start. There we go. So what I'm going to do is cover a few main topics, and even I could see that there was going to be some links across there, so looking at social media and things like that. Something else that's worth stating, and I think for this particular part, but also for Hina, my colleague, who's going to be presenting just after lunch, is we have so much data available now, and our problem is making sense of it. Once we've made sense of it, we've got to do something with it. And that's really the emphasis of both of these sessions. It's about getting to understand, but also do something, turn it into some kind of action. So what we'll do is look at some examples. So my session is going to be around customer analytics. We're going to look at some examples. I've got some sort of examples that our customers have done, sort of to spread the news about the things that they've done. But also we'll talk about some of the opportunities that are available to you using the same techniques. So we'll start off really on the competitive advantage. Who's using business intelligence tools at the moment? A few of you. Is anyone using any predictive analytics at all? Just the same people, more or less. Okay, so a big opportunity for perhaps understanding something a bit newer. Let's go back and look at business intelligence. It's a great way of getting information presented in a consumable manner. It's often reports, charts, dashboards, those kind of things that are reviewing what's happened at various parts of a whole organisation. It might be dashboards about customer performance, it might be dashboards and reports and charts about sales figures, it might be about human resource issues. There's a whole collection of things that you can present. They tend to be looking backwards. They're set up in a framework where you understand what has happened. What we're doing here is saying, let's understand what's happened in the past, but use it to look forward. If we can look forward, we tend to make a sort of better decision about where we're going to go. Generally, if we walk forward, we tend to have our eyes open. We're making predictions about where our feet are going to go, where our ultimate path is going to be. We do all that because we have an understanding of where we've been, but also how we get to go forward. And that's really important understanding from the predictive analytics side. They link together in the why section in the middle. Why for business intelligence and reports tends to happen in here from the consumer's point of view. For predictive analytics, we take a similar view, we pick up the why, but we turn it into some kind of model. You'll be familiar with equations that you might have learnt at school, and then you feed those numbers in and you get something out the far end. It's no more complex than that. But what we're doing is we're understanding what those patterns of behaviour were, and we're using those to make assessments of what might happen in the future. So where might we do that? That's the bit we're going to focus on for our two sessions. They link together. they're all part and parcel of the same analytics world. One isn't better than the other, they both have their place, and they nicely integrate together in one sort of understanding of what to do within a business. Probably familiar with an expression, sense and respond. We add to it now with the predict and act. And the two things give us a vision of where we've been and where we potentially may go. If you don't like my words, here's some wiser people than me have come up with their ideas. I like this last one here. Actionable, statistically supported insights from data that help drive competitive advantage. That's a sort of an understanding of what predictive analytics is all about. A couple of strong points. Actionable. Business intelligence doesn't give you anything actionable. It gives you an understanding. It doesn't give you anything that says, do this, do that. You can't even insert it in the middle of people's behaviour. We have got an opportunity here. So customers, we're all customers. We all buy things, don't we? Yeah, you bet. We all buy things. So things are happening to us as customers, but also here from business perspective, we've got an opportunity to change people's behaviours. Not just about selling more. It's not just about marketing. It's about helping them to do things better, have a better interaction, provide a better service. There's a whole collection of things. It's not just about marketing. And it's about the actionable. You've got to find somewhere that you're actually going to change things. If you're thinking of a forecast, a straightforward forecast of a demand for a particular product that you supply, you put that forecast somewhere where you can action it, maybe a plan. You put it maybe into the supply chain. It's not just a figure on a table or on a chart somewhere. It's actually something that sits in a business process. So that's really important to think about these things as always, where am I going to put this analytics? There's no point doing it unless you're going to gain some advantage. And that advantage might be to your customers or it might be to yourselves. If it's just there, it's a piece of information which appears somewhere in the organisation, that's just more like a science project. This is about making a difference. Don't believe them, and you don't believe me, you may or may not believe Gartner. So there's a fantastic little quote. How far is 2014 away? What is it, 13 months now? It's really not very far. 30% of all analytic applications will be involving some form of predictive analytics. So there weren't many hands going up, were there? Alright, so I'm going to come back here in 13 months or maybe another 12 months onto that, and I want to see a lot more hands going up. It's inescapable now. And there are a lot of people, I'll show you examples, a lot of people getting good work from it. How do we go about doing it? That's the real hub of what we need to discuss. It's great saying, yeah, it's a fanciful thing. How do we go about doing it? Well, first we find somewhere that we can take action. You all have your business problems. You all have your ways of interacting with customers or doing business across a whole supply network, whatever it may be. You've all got different disciplines you come from. There are times where things happen that are significant. Let's just take a very simple example. When you're shopping, you may purchase something. That's a moment of truth. You've actually bought something. Well, that's pretty hard and fairly easy to understand, but browsing is a moment of truth. If you're thinking about putting something in a cart, for example, or a basket, I don't know what term you use, if you're thinking about putting that, that's a moment of truth. You can change people's behaviour at that point. Maybe they phone up a call centre, they're complaining, or they're phoning up to maybe put in an order. These are all key moments that you can change things. You've also got things like a sort of a harder fact there, an out of stock. That's a moment in time where you can actually start to affect something. What you're trying to do is stop an out of stock. If you want to, I'm using a retail example here. You're trying to stop that problem. So there's a moment that you can actually work on. You can try and change the behaviour, in this case, of a supply chain to make sure that the items are in the right place at the right time. In the customer world, we think about these sort of 5 main areas. Just a very simple way. You can think about them any way, which way you want, but these are just very simple ways. You're either getting new customers, you're trying to grow the existing relationship you have, you're trying to retain them. That's really important. It's easier to keep a customer than it is to find a new customer. And usually it costs an awful lot less. And then some of you, it may be appropriate, fraud and risk may be key elements of your customer interactions. It's a utopian vision, but it's something, I think, to aim for in some degree. If you were to get all of these glued together into one place and have this fantastic little data system working where you had this, I really want to come and have a look. This is the future we should all aim for. However, if you've only got 1 or 2 of them, that's way better than nothing. all the time you're trying to build up a single view of whatever it is that you're looking at. In this case, we're thinking about a customer, so a single view of the customer. When we've got some transactional history, we bring that back. Now, transaction could be shopping, or it could be to do with interactions that you have if you're not dealing in retail, for example. So services that you provide. You look at the historical perspective of those interactions you have. We see all these other different sources of information, which we're going to come back to here. I saw Louise was sort of pointing to the back several times, and I presume that was referring around the sort of social data side of things. So we'll have a look at that as we go through. These are all sources of information that can help you change your interactions that you have, in this case, with customers. How do we go about doing it? It's a very simple mantra that we use. First of all that sort of data, we capture. We find it somewhere. You can either buy it, if it's customer data, you can go buy some. But you've probably got most of the data yourselves. If you're dealing with a customer, you've probably got most of the data yourselves in some form or other. It's in a variety of different types. So we have to think about how we're going to pull together those different types of data. Big data is the kind of conversation topics I'm coming up against time and time again now. Everyone is drowning in data. They've got more data than they can deal with. So they need a good way of being able to harness it, pull it together, and come up with that consolidated view. Once we've captured the data, we then need to build some understanding around it. Remember that why in the middle? We go around the why by looking at these kinds of models that we create. So data, we're probably familiar with statistics. You might have grown at me when we did those at school. That's a place for them. Well, they have a place in business also. But also data mining. That sort of takes it on to a next level and deals with big, massive amounts of data, complicated data, unstructured data. It can pull together those patterns. My background is in psychology, and I tend to see the world in terms of patterns. This really appeals to me because this is all about finding those patterns that you can't do on your own. You can come up with 20 or 30 patterns maybe as a human being, but if you want to find those subtle interrelationships between those sources of data and the values in that data, you need some tools. But look over here as well. We've also got tools that enable you to extract meaning and sentiment from text. So when we say there are different sources of data, so like Facebook was mentioned several times, Twitter was mentioned several times, those can be really valuable sources of information for how to run your business. Not just about run the relationship, but run your business. And we've got some examples later on. With all of these analytics, giving you these models that you work with, we need some place to put that into action. So here we can see we've got call centres, we've got smartphones, we've got website interactions. It could be a whole variety of things. Smart till systems, it could be operational systems. What do you call those things? iPads? An old man moment there, wasn't it? iPads. So having that interaction and allowing you to express the results of those analytics is really important. So we'll have a look at some examples of those. You'll be familiar with this kind of approach about customers. So a sort of a life cycle. You can think about your own journey through maybe even purchasing something. You can very easily sort of work things out. So we think about whether we're going to buy something, whether we're interested in it, might go away and do some research. There's a lot of data opportunities there. Purchase, fantastic. You're going to then get it delivered, or you're going to take it home and you're going to use it. There's a whole set of interactions that we can play around with there. You may or may not end up with customer service, hopefully not. That would be a very nice position not to go there, but again, it's an opportunity to do something. But of course, we can also be advocates. One of the big drivers now in retail, of course, is other people's opinions of what these products and services are. So that's a moment for us to interact and help to do better business, if you like. If you want to go back to the sort of the more marketing-y side of things, then we've definitely got this area in the middle as to how do you incentivize people to perhaps get more of something or change and do something else. So that's a sort of a very traditional sort of area where customer analytics has had a play, but you might not be thinking about these as where customer analytics has a play. They fall into rough kind of areas here, so we've got some marketing side of things, sales, support services, feedback management. We've got some examples here for some different companies. So I'll just pop these up and talk through a couple of the different customer stories, if you like. Straightforward marketing. Avis we saw there, very simple example of being able to understand customer behaviour more, enabling them to cut down the volumes. I don't know if anybody's an Avis customer or not and they get all these emails, but they decided that there were so many emails going out that they needed to focus them down. So just by simple analytics of understanding who did what sort of fuel state they left the car in, where they put things, how often they did things, they could really narrow down and become much more specific. Very simple, very, very simple. I think everyone can get that one. What we see in this medical company, it's not about trying to get customers to buy more. It's not trying to get them to have another policy. They said, hang on, we need to take a different view about what we're doing. Our competitive advantage is making sure that customers, in that case, the sort of patients potentially, didn't actually become patients. So they intervened way in advance by having all this customer data they had and then sent prevention programs which were tailored to the risk factors that they worked out for each of the individual people that were on their books. So it's a very different kind of approach to just saying marketing is the way forward. They actually went in to get their advantage by changing people's behaviours. So I'll send you a program to say look after yourself in these kind of ways. Not to say you're at risk of this, because that's probably not going to be a very, very friendly thing to suddenly have a piece of post with, is it? So they're saying these are the programs which you might wish to pay attention to. Insurance companies, there are lots and lots of examples of insurance companies that when you phone them up and you say, I've just crashed my car, they go through a series, called a first notification of loss. They go through a series of steps to ask you questions. Anyone been in an accident and they've had to ring through? Just you. I think you've got a question for the next session after lunch there. They ask you a series of questions, and in those questions they're assessing the risk of fraud and the risk to them of a big payout. They don't have endless amounts of people that can go along and do the surveys and check the cars and check that everything is all correct. They also can delight customers by servicing them straight away by saying, we'll give you a check straight away. How cool would that be? You'd all feel pretty happy when your car's just been totaled and you say, I can go buy a new one, that's great. So what they do is they gather all this information and they're scoring you through this conversation. So it's real time, they're going through and they're working out your assessment. And the act part then is to get filtered through the system. You either get a check sent straight to you, or you get put into a queue where you might get investigated. And all the information that you've collected goes through into that queue with it, so that then the loss adjuster can come along and make sort of certain decisions. But another part of that act is then to prioritise. So those people that end up in the queue, those which are easiest to deal with or the highest customer value, say for example, or the most risk of being further exposure down the line, they can be prioritised for investigation. So we've got a couple of action points that exist off that initial point, and that's all about using customer data. A telco example. Here they have a churn problem. So they had pretty much they had media services, they had telephone, mobile, they had a whole collection of things. And their churn rate was a industry sort of regular, sort of 19%. They really wanted to drop this churn rate, so losing customers, they were bleeding customers left, right and centre, they were just swapping to other providers. So they looked through all the data they've got, all the historical information they had, but they said, okay, well we can put that into a predictive model. They reduced the churn rate sort of fairly quickly. They found out 3 months before the time that their contract was up was a good time to contact them. Well, hang on, it's actually even better, 6 months in advance, because 3 months they're starting to look around, so you get them. So they worked this program out and they dropped down their churn rate. They said, hang on, we can do better than that. We can do much better than that. And they started to look at all the interactions they've had with the customers and started pulling out text information. So rather than just being the hard data facts that they had about all the services that provided and when they were spoken to, they actually went back and started looking at the interactions and pulling out bits of information from those interactions, from the text that they had stored through customer service or emails and things like that. And they got it down to just a tiny, tiny 2%. And that's almost unheard of. So scraping out that extra piece of customer insight can give you a real significant advantage. So not losing customers is a lot of money to them. It's a lot of money. TV company in Holland. They had X Factor and a couple of other those modern posh shows. I can't remember what they are. The X Factor is one of them. They were finding the audience figures were dropping. They were finding that the customers weren't particularly happy with the show. So they started paying attention to the tweets, started paying attention to all the blogs that were out there. They pulled in all of this online information, they pulled it in and started to understand what the sort of feelings were behind the reactions to different things. And they picked out certain key themes and then injected them straight back into the sequence of the shows. So within a week, they could change the format of a show. There's only so much they could do legally, because X Factor is a fairly rigid program. But they could change certain things, like, for example, being able to bring in extra behind-the-scenes views. That was sort of something that customers were complaining about. And as they were going through, I've lost my little blue box there, but they found out that the whole process was increasing the activity of people being excited about the program. So here, by over 400%, there was a small amount of activity, and then we saw this whole activity growing and growing and growing as people are getting more and more into what's happening. And they could see it through their interventions. So every intervention caused them more and more excitement. And of course, excitement is great because it's more viewers equals more advertising revenue. So a very simple equation that we used. I noticed there was the thing about ROI on your example. So all of these things need to have some way of being able to determine that there is a return on investment for doing these analytics. I could go on for hours, but I think you've got the point there. It's not just about marketing. Let's have a look at another couple of customer-based examples. If all you have is transactional data, the most that you're probably going to be able to do is look at the relationship between items in that transaction. So a very retail-focused example here. So we've got all of our shopping history. We look to see which products go with which. What can you do? In-store promotions, perhaps. Maybe you could think about a sort of a local drop. Do you get those flyers that go through your door from a local store? Some of you, yeah. That's about as far as you can go until you understand something about your customers. If you're lucky enough to have a loyalty scheme or some way of identifying a customer, this whole completely more complex world is available to you. In this case, you could think about it in terms of targeted marketing. Got all these other sources of data. Remember our sources of data we had around the outside? All these other sources of data. We build much richer models, so much like that telco example, and we could do much more with it in terms of the interactions. That's a fanciful kind of thing. This is from a customer. So taking the first part, they start off and all they could do was those basic sort of analyses, gives you a sort of understanding of what to do. But they had an opportunity to go back to the customers every quarter. So every 3 months they went back and they gave them a gift, if you like. So in this case, they were either offers or special coupons that they could go back and they could redeem by, they could get 2-for-1 points or whatever it was on their system. So, and these guys have won an award for what they do with their analytics in their loyalty program. I mean, it's big, big stuff. So here, they originally just sent out, and I think we got this will do and this will do, very sort of blunt, filtered kind of marketing. And say, well, people look like this, we'll send them this, and people look like this, we'll send them this. They went through this whole collection of analytics to get them to understand the finer points of behaviour. And I don't know if anybody's a real sort of workbook reader, but there's a great book called Scoring Points, and it's all about the Tesco Club card. So, has anyone read it? No? It's absolutely fantastic. It shows you how a company can change what it does and how it thinks by deploying analytics right throughout the company. And it was about collecting data from customers. So most of us in the UK are probably club card holders. And it's a fantastic story of how you have to change business if you're going to do these kind of things. You can't just do it and then just have it sort of sat as a report somewhere. You've literally got to change your business, and it's about how the business changed, as well as the mechanics of the sort of the loyalty program and the points.
So, what was the name of the book?
Scoring Points. It's about Tesco. Yeah, we can write it down. Yeah. So these guys, I was a member of their scheme. I am still a member of their scheme, and I could tell the month that they turned it on. It was fantastic because they said, "Oh God, it's like recycled the whole thing." Occasionally, I'd get a voucher I could actually use. Turn this thing on. I'm suddenly out of my 12 or 16 coupons. I can use 8, 10 of them. Now I think that's pretty cool because I'm in a house of 4 people, and I shop for all 4 of us. But yet it could still get stuff that I found really useful. I thought that was very impressive. And it's just got better and better as time has gone on. And it was just really funny just to see that month when it went on. I was like, whoa, what's going on? They're using our stuff too, that's brilliant. Let's take it and ramp it up a gear. Okay, that was every quarter. It might go a bit faster than that for some companies. Let's ramp it up a gear. Okay, that looks a bit horrible and looks like someone's thrown up on there, but the idea behind this is that we can enhance, we can augment the underlying data that we get from these different sources by using predictive models. We've all heard of customer segments. Yep. We all exhibit ourselves in a variety of ways in different customer segments. Well, those are created through a knowledge of what's happened in the past. They're created and then applied back to us. And then the decisions are made on what to do with them, perhaps based on a customer segment. So go back to the scoring points book. They talk you through how they go about doing it. But that's kind of pretty blunt. Have you seen the film? Most people get Shakespeare and things like that. For me, you get rubbish films. But have you seen Silence of the Lambs? Yeah, of course, yeah. And Hannibal Lecter is in there, and it's in that cell at the end, and then Agent Starling comes along with all those forms and everything, puts it into his tray, and he just shoves it back, and he says, "Don't try and dissect me with your blunt little forms." And I thought that was really good, because it's like, it's too blunt, some of these things. If I'm in a bucket with 4,000 other people, you're not really paying attention to me. But the analytics can really get down to a level of one person. This isn't science fiction, this is absolutely what this technology is all about. It gets down to that individual person, and you can get to understand patterns and make predictions at an individual level. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to go down to an individual level, because at the dimensions we have, you and I might be similar, but yet we're different on those same dimensions. So once we've augmented the data, we then go into the real-time interaction. What am I going to do that best serves that situation? It's going to be some more use of predictive models. So all these different figures and enhanced data we have about a customer, i.e. you and me, we can put that into operation and make predictions there and then about something. Who buys books online? Who buys anything online? Yeah. Who buys books online? Yeah. Who's used the company that begins with A and ends in... yeah, pretty much most of us, okay. Well, they use modelling. Of course they do. And I find it's a bit of a sport now. It just cheers me up every day. If I'm feeling a bit glum, I'll go onto Amazon and I'll just start doing things. So I love the recommendations that come out. And every now and again it comes up with a recommendation that goes, "You've got me, you've nailed me, you've absolutely sorted me out, you know me, you understand me, you've recommended something that I really, really like. The problem is I bought it from you 2 months ago. Why are you recommending this again?" So we need to think about it's making good decisions. The bit I dislike is it's people like you who also bought this. Why not people, why me? Why not recommend for me, not people like me? I don't know, it's a philosophical standpoint, some of the gripes. So we use those kind of predictive models, but we also use business rules. Don't offer me this if you've already bought it from you. Don't even offer it to me. Great that you spotted, I like it. But that was pretty easy because I bought it from you. Okay, recommend something else, I might consider buying that. We find the place that we're going to put that into interaction. Maybe that it's in a website, a very simple example. But it may be through call centres, it may be through various other interactions. We've got a lovely story about a telco. And you go into the phone shop, you go into there, and there's a screen. You can log into your account and you can do various things. And it's just an account and a screen, and it's where you're communicating with that company. Around the screen there are various bits of information, and they're all colour-coded. So you wouldn't know, it just looks like a colour scheme. But anyone who's standing over your shoulder, i.e. a sales assistant, has been trained to look at the different colours. And one of the colours is about lifetime value, for example. Are they really high value? Are they close to churning? Are they close to the end of their contract? And it gives you information very, very subtly in that interaction. The person who's doing it doesn't know anything about it. So that's pretty clever use of analytics. Okay, you might not like it, but it's pretty clever. Now you're going to go and study everything on your screens now, aren't you? What are they doing watching me? So here, don't just think about it as a website and a bit of marketing. I mean, it's much, much more complex than that. If we go into that, if you haven't heard of these guys, you're going to hear of them. They're Amazon plus eBay, and if they had children, it's still not as big as these guys. This is huge stuff, and it's coming our way. Okay, there's some pretty large figures on there. I'll let you read that one. Are we giving copies away of this presentation? Yeah, absolutely. So you have to copy it all down. All these different zones, these are all very personal offers which are made. Very personal offers. The service itself is providing, it's a framework. So like Amazon and eBay, it's a framework. But they also provide services themselves. They do insurance and travel and things like that. So they're trying to get the best for individual suppliers, sort of stores that are selling through this marketplace, but also they want to sell their services too. So there's a massive amount of analytics behind the scenes. They start looking at predictive models, they look at building out basket analysis, things that you've bought, what things can we recommend, What things can we work out about you that you've done, so we can make suggestions based on inventory that's in there, that's surplus industry. There's a whole ton of analytics that can sit behind this. We also need to put it into action. You've got to put some decision management around it. You need to know what's going on. There you go. The nice relationship between business intelligence and predictive analytics. It's great doing these things, but if you don't keep track of it, how do you know you're being successful? So having reports, getting understanding about what's going on is really important. But also finding other ways of just being able to record those interactions gives you more data. That allows you to make more decisions later on. So it becomes a self-fulfilling kind of process. If I just take a little, do you know the word skewer when you do kebabs and things? I was just thinking at the back then when you were talking, one of the things that's happened, you probably didn't even notice it as we've gone through there, is the speed of interaction has increased. So we started off every 3 months. We're right now down to absolutely at that moment making a decision. So analytics is the same analytics that sits behind it. It's giving you that opportunity to change behaviours, either long term or immediately there and then. That's a fantastic opportunity. Even that example on the website, you can go faster than that still if you need to. So I was at a customer yesterday and we were talking about in milliseconds, the analytics are run in milliseconds and at incredible volume, so millions of transactions are scored in a second. And it's about data in motion. So we're not just talking here about a customer interaction that I may shop once or twice a year with Amazon. You can apply the same analytics to data which is incredibly fast moving. For example, if you've got a telephone company and they want to prioritise calls, not every call makes it through. If there's a high volume, some calls get dropped. So they can prioritise calls. That's the fact of life. So they can start looking, if they want to, they can start looking at all this data, all the calls that are coming through. They can prioritise who may or may not get dropped. I'm not saying they're doing it, just as an example, it's a use case. They can prioritise who may or may not get dropped. And they can do that by lifetime value because they're scoring people. So just as this data is flying through, you know, imagine how quick the networks are working. It's the same analytics. Exactly the same analytics that goes with those quarterly statements. That's kind of nice to know that you're part of that whole thing. All right, that was my little skewer moment that I had there. I want to tie together with some of the stuff that Louise was saying, I think, and that was about the importance of social media. I mentioned before about different types of data. How am I doing?
15 minutes.
15 minutes left.
Yes.
I'm 15 minutes over, aren't I?
No, it's wrong.
Sorry, it's half I said, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought I was doing all right then. Different types of data. Remember the capture? We had all those different little icons for different sources of data. Well, this is a fantastic opportunity. It's still in the customer realm, but quite often you actually don't have the contact with the customer. So why bother doing it? What was your answer to that? Sorry? What? You weren't expecting a question there, were you?
I was expecting the answer from you.
Oh, rhetorical, is it? Yeah. I know the answer. What can you get out of social media if you can't get in contact with a customer? That's the question. Well, you can do things like brand stewardship, you can do product research, you can get to understand sentiment about services which are supplied. I can't think of an organisation which couldn't gain something from it. We all gain something from it as individuals. I mean, I've just gone onto Facebook, please don't bother, I've just gone onto Facebook and I'm already sort of overwhelmed by sort of everything coming in, and I can get loads of feedback about me if I want to. Yeah, I'm not going to do that because that's just vain and a complete waste of my time. However, as an organisation you can do exactly the same. You can get to understand what people perceive of you. You also have an opportunity. So, has anyone got a Facebook website for their company? And do you have an application that sits inside it? Yeah, there you go, that's where I'm going. So that's an opportunity, that's a place where we can act, if you like. And there's some great stories starting to appear of companies understanding the interactions that you have very well. You know, you have to sign up and you have to agree to being communicated to and that kind of stuff through this application. Same smartphones, same idea. But that's an opportunity then for you to change things in that relationship that you have with that particular customer. Now, you still don't know who that customer is. Or do you? Interesting philosophical question. All right, so there's just a few screens that we've got from just a way of being able to look at social media. You obviously have to have a source of data. be that Facebook, or Twitter was mentioned several times, I understood that. There's all sorts of Flickr, there's all sorts of places you can go to. Blogs, emails. That's a bit mean, isn't it? Analysing people's emails. Would that ever happen, do you think? No one's going to own up. No one's going to own up to it. I can assure you people have mined emails for things. It's up to you. It's whatever you can get access to, whether legally, morally, or psychologically that you feel comfortable getting hold of information. It's a source of data, and the tools will allow you to get things from it. So here we're starting to look at things over time. So sentiment. So we've got positive, negative, neutral, and ambivalent. Now that's nice. It's like ambivalent and neutral. So neutral, but ambivalent is I've been positive and I've been negative. And you have to sort of dissect that in a different kind of way. You can be positive about something and negative. What we can do here is we can track over time, and we can start to see where certain things have been causing changes. Just a nice way of looking at things. If we want to dig into that, we can actually go and find, so they're colour-coded here, we can actually go and find the sources of that data that have contributed to that chart. So drilling through to find out. And of course we go from the massive to the micro. And are you going to get upset that one person has said something? For those of you who are doing it, do you get upset that one person makes a comment, generally? No? There's a few people not choosing to answer at this point because they think I'm going to catch them out, I think.
But there was a famous case here. A large shipping company had a complaint about dumping garbage overboard.
Right.
Just one tweet. And the manager of the social interaction page, he removed it because it was bad PR. People noticed it, and there was a storm talking about this large shipping company doing illegal things in international waters. It cost them millions.
Right, right. Sometimes it's very difficult to spot those ones. Now, a careful and keen-eyed person would spot that and realise that there was a lot of danger attached to that one particular moment. You know, let's go quiet, hope it disappears. Or if you act, you've got to act sensibly. There was another one about a sandwich that a supplier, a supermarket supplier, a sandwich had a little piece of mouse. Something you probably came across this one. So it's just one comment as a piece of a mouse. It was in a sandwich. Thing took off, absolutely took off. It took damage to stock, all sorts of things. It was a real sort of rescue mission that they had to work on. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, you kind of one thing can cause a lot of damage. Generally, it generally doesn't. But that's the balancing act, is being able to understand what to do with this kind of stuff. So getting to see that it's part of something that's growing is really important. Getting to see that it's one thing amongst many other things that are happening is also equally important. Evolving topics is a fantastic area. So inside this one, with the evolving topics, what it gets to these little word clouds. So if I go back, so with some of these things, we're looking at particular areas. So we might be looking at hot topics, keywords, might be sort of searching for things. If we go the other way around, what this is doing is looking at the relationships between words and concepts. And it isn't a text search. Let's be clear about this. It isn't a text search. I wouldn't ask this to go find anybody who says yes, no, or maybe. This is actually understanding in the language how people feel about things. And it's looking for concepts. So it comes back and says, well, there are certain topics which are now starting to bubble up. Now this is great news, because trying to keep up with, what was the numbers you quoted? I'll try and dig out, there's a YouTube clip. I'll play at the break if we can get hold of it. It's fantastic that you would not believe the numbers of things that are out there. Well, I started off by saying we're at a tipping point. The volume out there is phenomenal. Fire hose is nothing. You know, I don't know what the next size is. It's just absolutely massive. So here, the stuff that happens, you can't code, you can't control, you can't. So it comes back and tells you what, this is a topic which is bubbling up. You might be interested in this. And then you can track it over time. You can see how things are going. And what we find is that some people are starting to glue together a lot of this stuff into a sort of a control zone, where they'll have all their standard metrics that will be coming in, their KPIs for their business, but they'll also be tracking some social media stuff as well. And I'll dig out that YouTube video as well. So it's a Gatorade. If anyone's seen the Gatorade Mission Control, okay, we'll dig that one out for you, so you can play that one at break time. We'll give you the URL, and you can go and have a look at it as well. But really interesting that they actually empower some people in an organisation to use the analytics to take action themselves. So if they see an emerging topic coming up, they're actually empowered to do something. So they can do the brand stewardship there and then if they wish. They can access these Facebook accounts if they've got permission to. They can actually do something. Good use of analytics. All right, this is a bit overly complicated, but really it's just showing you that analytics should sit as part of the organisation. Go back to that book, Scoring Points. They took a constructive approach. They decided to build a proper department. They decided to embrace analytics as a corporate function. That's great. It's not just sat there as, I give it to you, you're an analyst, you do stuff, and occasionally you can fight into the boardroom and say, there's something going on, guys. They're actually making it part of the business. You also then have to look at it in terms of, well, if you and I are doing it, and you and I are doing it, and you and I are doing it, we need to share stuff. Well, if you and me go home at night, analytics still stays on. It's 24/7. It's not just the work day we close the laptop, analytics goes. These things are in operation. They're working. Imagine the fraud system. If that was just related to my laptop, that'd be pretty dumb, wouldn't it? So these things are big operational systems. So we have to have a whole governance system around it. I need to know that you've put the right one into production. So in a banking scenario, if there's credit risk scoring, I bet you anything you know, anything you like, that someone somewhere will hold you accountable for having that model in place. So we need governance, we need to have rules about how things, we need to have searchable assets to make sure that I'm using the same things as you. So when I start a new project, I use a core chunk which is already established. Thank you very much. And these are some of the issues which... 5 minutes. I don't even need 5 minutes. Yes. So these are some of the core issues which you need to address. You need to think about how analysts are going to work together, how they're going to reuse things. But when you go home at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we've got all of those models humming away, working in the background, working nicely, controlled. If a better model comes into operation, we need a system to allow us to shove that into operation. Why would a better model come into play? I'll save time and not ask you. It's because the world changes. So if we've done a good job with our analytics, we change the world, don't we? We change people's behaviours. We change the numbers of people that do this, that and the other. Because of that, all the data that we're now collecting should give us a clue that we need to think about our model being refreshed. So we refresh it and we can just slot it into production. It isn't a case of you running into the boardroom and saying, I think the world's changed, can we change the model? It's not going to work that way. We have to have a production system that allows us to do that. You can start off, and I will tell you now absolutely certainly, with certainty, all these things started off small and grew. Don't think of this being, I've got to have all these things. That guy at the front, he said we've got to have all these things, centre of excellence. It starts off on your laptop, and it grows from there. It starts off with one business problem, and success breeds success. I can tell you that. I've been in this business for a long time, and I can tell you that the projects lead on to other projects when they've been successful. Don't try and do this whole monolithic change the organisation. Again, read that book. It shows you how they started all the way through. I'm not on royalties. I don't get commission for the book at all. It's just an interesting read. Integration, it's got to be part of business process. So the act part has got to sit in and amongst those other activities. If it's a website, it's got to be part of the website. It can't be an analyst report somewhere. I had a lot of conversations that just sort of tickle my fancy really. I go in and I say, do you ever do basket analysis? You know, basket analysis? We covered it earlier. So they do a basket and they go, yeah, we did that once. Well, we did that, yeah, last year. And we went out and we got it bought and they came back and they came in with this sack barrow of paper. And it's like, oh, what are you going to do with that then? I said, did you look at it? And they said, well, we've got the 3 or 4 pages down. Just put that model into operation on a website, suddenly you've got recommendations. That's why you do a basket analysis. Customer segmentation, you go, yeah, I've got these PowerPoints from this agency. What are you going to do with them? You're nodding your way at the back, you've probably been there. You're going, oh yeah. Don't do that anymore though, do you? No. There you go. I didn't need 5 minutes. So really, I think what we're getting at, we've got a massive, massive amount of data that's floating around. You've all got loads of data. We've all got too much that we can deal with. We need some way of being able to contain it. Analytics is a great way of being able to contain it. We can look at reports, we can look at dashboards. They are fantastic. They have a place. Why not have a way of being able to turn that insight into some kind of action later on? Build a predictive model, run your vision of the future through it. Where's your business going to be? So Hina's going to talk about it more in terms of operations. I've talked it in terms of customers. But we've really got to think about a better way of being able to manage this complex world. And every day it gets more and more complex. So if we can do something even with part of it now, that's got to be worth something. Don't boil the ocean, we can't do that. Any questions? Anything? Oh, my God. Thank God he stopped talking. Yes, go for it.
Maybe just some elaboration around the concept of analysis, because you also use the word synthesis.
Synthesis,
and, analytics, as far as I know, means taking apart.
Yes.
And synthesis means putting back together.
Yep.
And I think that you're speaking much more actually about that what we need to be able to do is synthesis. And maybe analytics will be, that will be the computers that will do that. Or
that's a really interesting observation. I think we bring things together for a purpose. So generally, when we do something like this, we'll do it to solve a business problem. So all these sources of data, that's where the integration, the synthesis comes together, because we're putting it together to solve a particular problem. And one way of bringing it together is not just make a database, because that doesn't do anything. We would make that source of data mean something. We'd extract the insight from it and put it to solve a business problem. So that, to me, is the synthesis. So you're synthesizing what you've got.
Yeah.
So you're recomposing what you can find into something that is quite pointed. And you just keep doing that time and time again. We often ROI is really key. So no one takes on a project unless they can demonstrate return on investment. But we often find you get incremental return on investment. So once you've invested a lot to get the first few projects going, you get additional return on investment very easily because all the structures are in place. You're resynthesizing what you've got to solve another business problem, and you're tackling that on the side. There's a really good, it's a case study in my mind, but I was working a lot with an insurance company, and they started off by just they were looking at fraud, and they were trying to find out different areas of risk and things like that. They built this thing out time and time again. They just added to it, and they get customer experience stuff. They're looking at all sorts of customer interaction. They now monitor their call centres by using analytics, and they can work out who's been waiting, how long, and what impact that has. But they then decided, okay, well that's great, and they're getting more and more return on investment. And then they said, well, hang on, we could do even better than that. Why don't we go back and look at all of our interactions we have with our customers and build a customer experience score? So that customer experience score is then presented to someone on the phone. So when they ring up to renew, when they ring up to make a complaint, when they ring up to change an address, that customer information score is also brought up in front of them. So if they know this person has been in the queue for X minutes and been held there, they've tried 3 times but not got through, they can collect all these metrics that were just hard metrics. They're synthesizing them all together, if I use your expression, to allow them to get a better understanding of that customer's experience. And then they make a decision as to how they act with that customer based on that new insight. And you say, all right, and they do surveys as well. So after certain things are done, they do surveys. Not everyone gets surveyed, not everyone gets held in a queue. So they built predictive models to say, this kind of person, that's the likelihood of them having this kind of customer experience score. So everyone then has a customer experience score that they can work to. And it just breeds. Another example was an auto parts retailer and service provider for cars. And they had a store network of gazillion, so 3,500 stores, and they had 100,000 SKUs that they were dealing with. It's all far too complicated, this thing. There was spreadsheets left, right and centre. So they said, we need a bit more discipline around this, and they built what they called then a department for merchandising science, which was just a bunch of experts. They weren't analysts, a bunch of experts. They came in and said, right, well, we think we know what we're doing here, bought in some tools, built this, and then that became, again going back to the sort of Tesco example, that became the core operational system for assortment, for working out which parts needed to be where, which things should be merchandised in different kinds of ways. And it just came out of sort of nowhere. So it just started off with a business problem. How do we get together with all this information, and how do we put structure around it? So, very long-winded answer, but you're kind of synthesizing it in a variety of ways, both for the business problem, but as a business as well. Any other questions before you get rid of me? Because I'm standing in the way of coffee. All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.